So last week when Josh started the conversation, is it good? He talked about how we have to be the good in the world. He talked a lot about the different things that Christian organizations and Christians have done all throughout the world, and that is what Jesus said would set us apart, is our love. And while he was here, he spread his love, he spread his message, and he was the good in the world. And when he left, he challenged all of us, and in fact, commanded all of us to spread his love and be the good in the world. So, that brings me to a question. How did Jesus command us to love? Well, in John 13, verse 34, we're not going to turn there right now. I'm just riffing right off the top of my head, even though I studied this all week. Don't tell anyone. John 13:34 says that Christ tells us, love one another as I have loved you. So, that's pretty good. Love one another as Christ loved us, all of us, the entire world. Because Romans 5:8 says that Christ loved us while we were still sinners, while we were still his enemy, while we were still not doing good things, still trying to be friends with him, still not trying to do everything he asked us to do. He still died for us, still sacrificed himself for us. So, that brings me to another question. How did Christ love us? If we're supposed to love like him, then how did he love us? Well, in Luke chapter 6, verse 27, he tells us to love your enemies and do good to those who hate you. So, one might be able to say that Jesus commands us to love the people who are hard to love. And that is the title of my message tonight. It is also a country song that I will not sing for you, because you would love me a lot less if you had to hear me sing that country song. So, Jesus commands us to love the people that are hard to love. Because let's be honest, it's really easy to love the people who love us. It's really easy to love the people who are kind to us. Usually it's easy to love the people who care about us. I love all of you guys here, but that's because you act nice when you come here. You act generally respectful. I'll say generally. You act generally respectful, so it's really easy for me to love you guys. It's more difficult for me to love people who say that they hate me or who are very, very different than me. But that's exactly who Christ calls us to love, and that's who we see him loving all the time. He was constantly going out of his way to be around people who were unlike him and be around people who were trying to actively tear him down so that he could show them how much he loved them. Now, who are some of the most difficult people for us to love? I'm going to answer that. You guys don't have to. Some of the most difficult people for us to love are people that we trusted and they hurt us anyways. And there's a word for that in the English language. It's the word betray. So people that betrayed us, I think we can all agree, are extremely difficult to love. And Jesus shows us that we can do it anyway. So tonight, we're going to look at a story in the Bible about a time that Jesus was betrayed and how he reacted to it. Now, if you've been in church for a good long while, you probably think that I'm going to talk about Judas tonight. You would be wrong. Just stay with me. Stay listening. Don't tune me out. Start looking at your phone, talking to your friends, doing all that stuff. I saw you guys look up when I said stop looking at your phone. But I'm not calling you out. I just saw you look up. If you wouldn't have looked up, I wouldn't have even noticed. So just stay with me tonight, guys, because I'm going to tell you one of my very favorite Bible stories, one of Amber's very favorite Bible stories. So we're going to dive right in. We're going to start in Matthew chapter 26. I'm not going to read it just yet, but just so you guys know, I have my Bible up here because I love the Lord, and I want you guys to believe that and believe that I know what's going on. But I like some different versions than what I have with me. I have the NIV with me. I like the contemporary English version of the story that I'm going to tell tonight. So I'm going to be reading it off the screen, and it'll be up on the screens for you when we get there. But as we start this story, we are going to drop in at the Last Supper, Jesus' Last Supper with his disciples. This is really the last opportunity that he has to be close and intimate with his closest friends, the 12 disciples, before he's going to be arrested and then eventually die. So there at the Last Supper, Jesus is dropping knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb on them. And all of a sudden, Jesus kind of says a weird thing. Jesus says, hey, listen, guys, pretty soon some bad things are going to happen, and every single one of you is going to take off and run away. And so that's where we're going to pick up with Peter's reply, because you guys know Peter. Peter is always talking back. Peter's always talking crazy. So we're going to pick up in Matthew chapter 26 with Peter's reply, and it'll be on the screen for you so that we can all read it together. Oh, it's not there? Oh, it's on those screens but not back. All right, well, then I'm just going to turn around, guys. Please forgive me. I'll do like this so you can still see my face. Peter spoke up. Even if all the others reject you, I never will. And Jesus replied, I promise you, before a rooster crows tonight, you will say 3 times that you don't know me. But Peter said, even if I have to die with you, I will never say I don't know you. So we pick up with Jesus telling them, hey, listen, guys, you're not going to stand that strong when some crazy things start to happen. And Peter says, Jesus, I don't know if you know this, but it couldn't be me. I'm a ride or die for you, Jesus. Couldn't be me. I'm not going to run. There's no way. I'll die for you right now. Show me the gun. I'll die for you right this very minute. And Jesus says, that's easy for us to say while we're standing in this room. It may get a little harder in the very near future. So we're going to jump forward in our story a couple of hours. Jesus has now been arrested in the garden. His disciples, for the most part, run away. He's taken, put on trial. The first trial kind of goes weird, so they take him and put him on another trial in front of the Roman governor, accused of the crime of saying he's the king of the Jews. So he's in there on trial inside this palace. Peter and John are able to get up in the courtyard of this palace because they knew one of the Pharisees who was running this whole ordeal. So they get in there, and they're in this courtyard outside where Jesus is being tried in this palace. And Peter gets up around a fire. I think that's what the Bible says, that he's up around a fire. And a servant says to him, hey, you're that guy who was always with Jesus. You're one of his friends. And Peter goes, I don't know what you're talking about. Never seen the guy in my life. Now, I'm just going to scoot over here. Don't mind me. And Peter kind of slides off into the darkness. He finds himself around another group of people. And they say, hey, man, you were that guy with Jesus. I remember seeing you. Whenever Jesus was around, you were there. I remember seeing you. And now Peter kind of gets mad. And Peter says, that wasn't me. Listen to what I'm saying here. I'm telling you, that's not me. I wasn't around some guy called Jesus. So just leave me alone. And again, he kind of slides away from this group and moves on. Well, about this time, inside the palace, unbeknownst to Peter and John, Pilate is saying that he can't find any fault in Jesus, this Roman governor. And he says, if it'll make you guys feel better, we'll take him outside, we'll whip him, we'll torture him a little bit, and then we'll call it a day. So they bring Jesus outside, and as he is coming out, another person confronts Peter and says, I know you were one of those guys with Jesus. I can tell by your accent. You came from the same area as him, and I've seen you with him a bunch of times. And let's pick up from Luke chapter 22. I'm glad it showed up right before I had to admit that I forgot. We're going to pick up in Luke chapter 22 with what Peter says back to this third person who's confronting him as Jesus is coming out to one of the worst moments of his entire life. Peter replied, man, I don't know what you're talking about. And just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord spoken to him. Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. Now, I don't want you guys to miss this, because if you've been in church, you've probably heard that, Peter denies Jesus 3 times. But when we see it in Luke, it kind of gets a new flavor for it, because we realize that when Peter denies Jesus for the last time, just like he said he would, Jesus is right there. Jesus is close enough that he can hear him and make eye contact with him. So Peter is out here. In some of the other Gospels, it says that Peter curses on the name of the Lord, that Peter swears to God that he doesn't know Jesus. And right as he's doing this, Jesus is being led out to be tortured, and Jesus looks right at him. And Peter realizes that he's made a mistake, but it's too late. He's gone ahead and made this mistake 3 times, just like Jesus said that he would. So now, in the lowest moment of Jesus' life up to this point, his best friend has betrayed him straight to his face. And I tried to think this week, how would I handle a betrayal like that from a super close friend at a moment where all I needed was a friend, a moment where all I needed was somebody to support me? How would you guys respond? Come on, somebody shout out to me how you would respond if somebody from your close circle betrayed you like that. Probably do the same thing to him. Yeah, probably. I would certainly cut someone like that out of my friend group. Never let somebody like that have access to me again. I would probably tell all the other disciples, if I'm Jesus, when I come back from the dead, I'm going to be like, hey, that Peter guy, that guy stinks. We're not hanging around with Peter anymore. He's out. If I'm one of the disciples, not all these disciples were super upstanding citizens before they found Jesus. I'm probably got a lot of bad things to say about Peter at this point. In fact, one of Jesus' disciples was technically a terrorist. I don't want to get too deep into that, but he was part of a group that would kill Romans in the street. So, that guy might have had some ideas with what to do with Peter after he finds this out. And these are all the ways that we certainly would want to react to someone betraying us, especially at a critical moment when we needed them so much. So, let's find out how Jesus responds, because that's the whole point of tonight, is seeing how to love like Jesus. So now, I'm going to go ahead. You know the rest of the story. Jesus goes on. They whip him. They beat him. They torture him. He goes back in, and the people say, that's not enough. We want him to die. So Jesus ends up having to carry a cross up a hill and be nailed to that very cross. He dies, and luckily, we're going to skip forward in the story to 3 days later. 3 days after this, as most of you guys well know, Jesus comes back to life. And this is not known to his followers. So 3 of his female followers are going to his tomb on Sunday morning to go and visit him and see the body. And usually they'd bring stuff to make sure that the body didn't smell too bad. You don't want someone you love to smell and be rotting flesh. So they're going to come and see to his body. And when they get there, the tomb is wide open. And the only thing that's there is an angel with a message from Jesus. So if you guys will put that up, this is from Mark chapter 16. So this is the angel speaking. The man, the angel, said, "Don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus from Nazareth, who was nailed to a cross. God has raised him to life, and he isn't here. You can see the place where they put his body. Now go and tell his disciples, and especially Peter, that he will go ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there, just as he told you." So we can see from this passage that when Jesus wakes up from being dead for 3 days, the first thing he thinks is, I need for my friend to know that it's okay, that everything is okay. If I'm Peter and Jesus has looked at me when this moment's going on, I'm probably crying and throwing up for 3 days straight. And so Peter is probably somewhere right then still thinking about how he betrayed Jesus in that moment. And Jesus' first thought when he comes back to life is, I need Peter to know that he and I are going to be okay. And that's crazy to me, because we just said all these ways that we would react. If I'm giving the angel a message from me after I come back to life, I'm probably going to say, hey, go and tell my disciples, and definitely not Peter, to meet me in this specific place, because we are going to roast this man into eternity. Or I'm going to say, guys, never talk to Peter again. Make sure that people you know are not talking to Peter, are not meeting with him out in the streets, are not, doing good things for him, because this guy is a sucker. And this guy left me high and dry at the moment that I needed him the most. And we see that Jesus is the exact opposite of that. That Jesus had nothing to offer Peter except love and acceptance. And guys, I'm telling you tonight that if you are not offering love and acceptance to the people that have betrayed you, to the people that hurt you, then you are not living up to Jesus' standard for your life. You are not loving one another as Jesus loved us. And that's tough to say, because I'm telling you that I respond like a human all the time. And it is human to respond these ways, and we are called to something better than that. So when we find ourselves going through something, and now we're at school talking bad about him or her, and we're saying, well, they did this, and they are this, and, so we shouldn't even look at them. And, I know that she texted somebody else the other day, and so, he's definitely out too. So then, and it just keeps spreading, and you just have a million people now that you're like, this person sucks because they talk to a person who I think sucked. And that's the way that we're operating, guys. We're operating totally the opposite of how Jesus asked us to operate. So I would encourage you guys, I would challenge you guys to search your hearts and to see how you're treating the people who don't treat you well. Because in the scriptures it also says that even the sinners love those who love them. And we're not called to be like that. Jesus said they will know you by your love. And if you're not showing love to the people who are hard to love, then that ain't it. You're missing the mark. And so am I if I'm doing the same thing. Guys, when I was talking to Amber about this earlier, I was thinking, what is a good way to wrap this up? I need some absolute bars to drop on them. And this is what I was able to come up with. We don't get to choose what people do to us. We only get to choose how we respond, okay? So when we are out there and we are being hurt by people, we are finding ourselves in situations with people that are hard to love, the only thing that Christ asks us to do is to love them. I am checking my notes because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. There we go. And I'm not saying that betrayal is not going to happen, and I'm certainly not saying that it isn't going to hurt like crazy, but I am saying that you get to choose how to respond, and we should all aspire to respond like Jesus. And that might take some time. It really might. It might take some time. Jesus had 3 days of being dead to think about it, and that was the first thing he thought, was I need to let this person know that I love him and I accept him. And if he hadn't done that, then a lot of us might not be sitting here today. Because after Jesus returned to heaven, Peter and John were two of the main guys who continued talking about Jesus. No matter what happened, they were beaten, they were thrown in prison, they wouldn't stop talking about him. And I shudder to think that that might not have happened if Jesus hadn't offered that love and acceptance to Peter in his lowest moment.
Hey, I'm Josh Carter. Thank you so much for stopping by to view this message. If your next step is to receive Christ as your Lord and Savior, we are so excited for you and we want to help you take that next step. So jump in the description and click those links to find out what following Jesus is all about, what that means, and of course, what's next. And if your next step is baptism, we would love to schedule that for you. So just go to crosspointe.church, select next steps, and get baptized, and fill out that application, and we will schedule that day with you. So super excited for you. But again, thank you so much for viewing this week's message. Have a great day, and God bless.